Hi everyone, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be speaking with you. My name is Ian Boucher, and I'm an American librarian who researches superhero justice, the gap between the stories Americans tell themselves about justice and the justice they practice in the real world. Today I will be applying what I know of superheroes in the American justice system to reflect on some of the events the United States has been experiencing over the last few months. Because superheroes are about justice, and superheroes, as central figures in popular culture, have become a crucial part of crime media and how American culture understands justice, I will be considering this question of justice. What do American police responses to the current protests following the killing of George Floyd tell us about a culture that cultivates superhero media? The title of my presentation is Black Lives Matter in the Unmasking of America's Superheroes. Americans love superheroes, truth, justice, and the American way. Superheroes have spread across the globe. They speak to something within a lot of people. Their symbols are everywhere, and they have dominated movie sales. Our festival today is just one of many days dedicated to them. Superman flies Lex Luthor into prison. Spider-Man webs up jewelry thieves. The day is saved, and that is it, until the villains escape again. We talk about saving others, standing up for others. Here is Iron Man saving people from terrorists in Afghanistan, and Wonder Woman saving people during the First World War. We get angry when we see injustice on the screen, and further develop films as a result. People were very upset about the mass death and destruction at the end of the film Man of Steel, so Avengers: Age of Ultron has some emphasis on it, and Batman v Superman and Captain America: Civil War are about it. But this is what's on the news, what's been happening. A 75-year-old man in Buffalo, New York is pushed down, cracks his head, and police walk over him. The government fires tear gas at peaceful protesters in Washington, D.C. On May 25, 2020, George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when a police officer kept, and I quote the New York Times from an August 11th report about body camera footage, his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck from 8:19 until 8:28 p.m., for a total of 9 minutes and 30 seconds. This was despite Mr. Floyd's pleas and had started over a call about a counterfeit $20 bill. George Floyd's death, an image of a man saying that he can't breathe while police sat on his neck over $20, was the last straw for what many Americans had been seeing on the news over the last several years. Americans, believing in truth, justice, and the American way, and tired of what they had been seeing on the news, spoke up and responded to their neighbors in need. Protests in the United States built. It took a few days to pick up, for protesters to be loud enough so that people had to listen. It became something more than the status quo of constant death. More people started caring, and it led the politicians and corporations to care as well. A plaza in Washington, D.C. was named Black Lives Matter, and the National Football League said that they were wrong about disparaging kneeling during the national anthem at football games. And throughout all of this, the justice system responded by attacking peaceful protesters with tear gas, instigating riots, or abducting people into unmarked vans with no ID. Americans cheered Spider-Man rescuing a little girl who was Asian from a fire, or Supergirl defending an extraterrestrial from the xenophobic Agent Liberty, but they get police kicking a young woman who was protesting sitting in the street. Americans cheer the X-Men fighting Sentinels exterminating mutants and humans, and they get a young man like Kyle Rittenhouse killing people in Kenosha, Wisconsin, with police allowing it. But while superheroes defend the defenseless, we also have the elements of both empowering people, particularly young people, and frequently working with authorities. So what is happening here? While superheroes exhilarate us, the United States imprisons more people than anyone else in the world. And while people classified as black make up only a small amount of the United States population, they make up a significant part of the U.S. prison population. Here are some statistics from 2 U.S. government websites during the Trump administration, no less. The first here is the Federal Bureau of Prisons, demonstrating that 38.5% of inmates as of 2020 were black, and 57.7% of inmates as of 2020 were white. And here's another example from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Sentenced prisoners by race in 2018, you can see that 430,500 prisoners were white, and 465,200 prisoners were black. And in terms of the rate of imprisonment, in 2018, it was at 218 for white and 1,134 for black. This is despite studies finding that people of many ethnic and economic backgrounds have been found to use illegal drugs and commit traffic violations at about the same rates. To think people inherently commit more crimes because of how they look is racist. Americans watch science fiction movies about patrolling killer sentinel robots as this is happening all around them, where their system is built on laws throughout history that more harshly punish people who aren't considered white. This is well documented by researchers, and I recommend you ask your local library about scholarly articles on the topic. Even before reading the scholarly literature, is this what we expect from justice? Are these police responses, whether in apprehending someone or responding to peaceful protesters, what we would call the right thing? Why are things like this? How can superheroes be so popular, but Americans have this reality? The stories we tell and the justice we practice have many gaps between each other, but they are also very connected. America's superheroes have been unmasked, temporarily. The panels around the images have revealed themselves to keep our colors within the lines. America's superheroes are an illusion, and I mean this in terms of both our stories and the real-life figures they represent. It is more evident than ever before that America has a system of very warped ideas about justice, yet people see these things on the news and debate it. They see police shooting at people, and some side with the people and others side with the police. And some of the people siding with police have recently participated in their own protests against the U.S. government to be able to own guns or not wear masks to protect from COVID-19. This indicates to me that superheroes are effective because they reinforce a delusion to everyone. Whether people side with the people or police, they are siding with something that isn't there. Superheroes help support policies while fueling different narratives about justice. Some people are fighting for justice against the very system that was sold to them. Police are fighting with their gadgets and force. We watch superheroes and see violence as normal and okay. Superheroes reinforce how people see justice. Americans live in a system where there are cultural norms that make people perceive reality a certain way. Superheroes are violent because we are violent. Whether they are working for the system or against it, they are within it. It's what they know. This is what we see and what we keep telling each other. Even more cheerful superhero stories, like the Supergirl show, talk about the joy of punching things. Superheroes by and large become heroes by overcoming violence with their greater violence. Many of them learn that ultimately the system is the answer, but they continue to use their fists on their mission. And they all continue to be these special people doing it, helping a limited government. This messaging is effective for the people watching, and reinforces how we think about justice, both in the audience and on the police force. When superheroes like Wonder Woman come around and talk to criminals in lassos of truth like in the Linda Carter Wonder Woman TV show in the 1970s, those stories have been historically suppressed. How many police, defenders of the justice system, wear Frank Castle's symbol, an outsider of justice, compared to Diana Prince's symbol? And why do police and supporters use superhero symbols but then don't like the people they're protecting and serving actually advocating for better rights? That man in Buffalo, New York, who was knocked down earlier? Less than 24 hours after that, all 57 members of the Buffalo Police Department's emergency response team resigned in protest after members of the team were suspended without pay. And like some superheroes, some police are good. But even for society's greatest heroes, Earth's mightiest heroes, we might say, we are the system we reinforce. The good we do is limited by what we take for granted, the unspoken panels around us, the comfortable standards we're used to that we must challenge a little bit at a time. On a basic level, superheroes are about us getting the bad guy. They are symbols of justice and what we feel and experience. They help us feel that we have control. We like to feel that we have control over something, and America is a very individualistic society and a significant world power. Superheroes reinforce the lives of the audience and the authority of the institution. Superheroes work in conjunction with media that perpetuates the American way of life, a combination of what we know and what we're comfortable with. and the nuances of superhero comics are simplified into simpler entertainment of action scenes and explosions. The comics can go into more detail, but the films are more about thrilling action scenes and personal comedy and drama. However, both the films and the comics are both based on the same basic framework. In telling ourselves the stories we are telling, Americans are just telling ourselves things to make ourselves feel better, regardless of what actually is, and makes us blind to the reality that this includes others around us getting hurt or killed. The beginnings of most superheroes, at least originally, came from Americans, so living with what they're used to in American culture, and generally from a perspective of thinking that they're America's version of the term white. This comes with its own experiences. People who think they are white, to paraphrase Ta-Nehisi Coates, think of justice a certain way and think the law works a certain way. That police get the bad guy. Many white communities don't have to deal with police in the same kind of ways that communities of color do in the United States, which usually have a larger police presence and directed at them rather than behind them. On a primal level, superheroes empower us. So superheroes culturally show who is allowed to be empowered. And by and large, only certain people are empowered. It's people who consider themselves white. Police get the bad guys and lock them up. Most people are not experts in criminal justice, so they vote for what they think politicians would know, or just based on their own family background or fears. So they create stories based on that, perpetuating a certain way of life in the status quo. While superheroes can fight with or in opposition to institutions, the status quo lives on, as well as this idea of capturing, watching a battle, and keeping that in power. For those who aren't familiar with the American war on drugs, it was a system of policies meant to punish people who weren't considered white, not based on data, but based on politicians wanting to get votes from white people by capitalizing on their fears. And it's impacted policies and media around the world. So when that happened, superheroes reflected that, fighting drug criminals as their default, not entirely, but their baseline. From Batman to Luke Cage, it is in service to a system. When superheroes or white people stand against the government, it's a good thing. But when people of ethnic backgrounds outside of that category protest for more equal rights for all, it's something to be regarded with apprehension. White people can occupy Wall Street, but people of color are punished for peacefully protesting systemic racism. Superheroes reinforce the system. And even without the war on drugs, what do superheroes do? Especially, what do they do in larger media that encourage the system, which includes the police and American culture as a whole? They break knees. They blow people up. People were upset by the 2004 Punisher movie when the Punisher pretended to hurt someone with a popsicle. Recent months have strongly shown that the system's first priority is not to protect and serve people, but to protect and serve the system, that is historically based on literally beating certain people into submission. Americans have created and are telling ourselves one thing, but have used it as part of building another. We care so much about justice, but really have created and perpetuated a system that works against justice and for itself. We have this ideal of superheroes. But to what ideal do we hold our institutions and our society that superheroes most certainly represent? Superhero fans must see that their society has failed them. And to not fail ourselves, Americans and others must be active in, as Batman's Alfred Pennyworth might say, improving the foundations. Superheroes are their society. We must create a better society that reflects and creates better stories. What does justice mean to us? What laws and rhetoric are used for justice, and what are used for subjugation, or white supremacy? What judicial efforts are put into support, harmony, or strengthening society, and what efforts are put into punishing people, of color or otherwise? What does heroism mean? People want their superheroes to be simple. You hear it all the time. People say, well, this is just kid stuff, who cares? This isn't funny enough. This is too complex. This goes against formula. Then why do we keep paying to watch it? Why don't we want society's justice stories to be better? Why must we adhere to corporate formula? Recently, people have been more willing to try new things. There are more instances like Black Panther, Black Lightning, and Supergirl that are challenging it head-on in direct response. And there are even more examples throughout the history of the comics. Superheroes are challenging things more with each decade. I think we can consciously keep building on this and keep building our stories. and keep building our heroes. But we can't let it become a new system. We have to be aware of our laws. Being informed is important. Americans loved the Luke Cage show because of some powerful images, but didn't see its clouded understanding of the issues. American culture has larger issues with critical thinking. People don't like being uncomfortable, whether talking about racism, politics, Batman v Superman, or M. Night Shyamalan's Glass, both of which deconstructed superheroes. People like to cheer their reflections without looking at themselves, to be tough, but not ask themselves tough questions. The heroes we revere in real life and comics are flawed. We have to think about this. It's important to reflect, to correct. The people who live in justice already know the injustices of the world. Scholars have been talking about this for years. Read about your justice system. We need to not just let the Falcones of the world keep us looking the other way or scared. To be sure, many people think that they are already being heroes and standing up. In a way, we're doing what we mean right now. But we must ask ourselves, what does that mean? We need to reflect on what makes our heroes heroic, that core of helping people, of inspiring institutions and ourselves to be better. Be the ones who learn, who ask, who act how we talk and want to treat others rather than give it lip service. Only talk with no action, or nice talk with cruel action. Superheroes can be inspiring, and we need to channel and build on that part of it to make it more inspiring. The core idea of superheroes is that they are using their power for good, and there is a lot of potential in that. Talk to the people experiencing things. Talk to the researchers studying these things. Talk to your friends about what you thought was effective or ineffective about the way justice was portrayed in a film. Be engaged and vocal as fans and citizens shaping our fandoms and communities to be more informed, and do whatever else we can to make the system be equal for everyone. To not only consider certain injustices. Injustice is injustice. We want our superhero movies to move beyond fighting the same battles over and over as screaming people run away whose days have been disrupted. Well, let's think about the screen that created them. And if we're uncomfortable with asking the questions, ask ourselves why. Like our frustrations with the films we don't like, it can help society become better. Whatever you like, make sure it's informed by facts. I'm not talking about regulating what storytellers say. I'm talking about building a more informed and aware society, and everything else will come from that. Americans love superheroes, but our culture is built for this brutality. The truth has come out in the open, this gap between our delusions that keep us thinking one way and allowing the system to continue and strengthen. A system that responds this way to helping others who are in need. People's ideas of society are shaken, but the panels will eventually realign. We must remember the true identities, lest it becomes a brand new day, the next iteration of these things. For control, weapons, and technology don't look like clunky metal sentinels, or even the more sleeker ones in the Days of Future Past movie. Some police were kneeling, and streets have been renamed. But now what? Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with all of you today.